play. And another foul on board. His third for setting a screen.
Because of physical play, although Jordan Taylor just got caught with a moving screen.
Pick and roll. And a foul. Offensive foul coming up. Ken Valentine standing right there.
Izzo dying for a moving screen.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Moving Screen Podcast. It is St. Patrick's Day, March 17th. I'm Brendan Quinn of The Athletic, here with Dylan Burkhart of UM Hoops. Well, Dylan, this is weird.
The first quarantine edition podcast here.
You are safe and sound at your place in the greater Cleveland area. Are you technically in Cleveland or outside the city?
Currently in Rocky River.
Is that
suburb?
The suburb of Cleveland. And I am safely at my house here with Otis in Ann Arbor. Happy to report that we're both okay. And hope that everyone out there is fine and dealing with all this bullshit in your own personal ways. It's just can't really wrap my mind around it, let alone do a normal intro to a podcast. It is supposed to be. This would be the first day of the first four in Dayton.
This would be, yeah.
We would likely be. I would likely be en route to some city somewhere today.
You would probably be here.
I'd potentially be in Cleveland waiting for number 2 seeded Michigan State or whatever. And yeah, but this is a year unlike any other. So we did want to have a podcast it's in some shape and form, keep this thing going through all of this. But we wanted to have one today mainly to kind of wrap up the season, talk about, what's going to happen with these shutdowns for both programs, what they're kind of facing, and just talk and mainly give you folks out there something to listen to that doesn't have anything to do with our current reality. So, Dylan, do you have anything to say to the people out there?
I would think people probably have a lot of time to listen to podcasts. I know I do, so might as well keep the content coming, right?
Do you have any other podcast recommendations for people looking to fill their time?
Wow, off the cuff. I would have to get back to you on that. There's a lot of good ones. I don't know about timely ones right now. What are you going to throw out there? You ready to go?
Oh, my favorite podcast is The Dollop. Dollop. It is 2 comedians, Gareth Reynolds and how am I blanking? Dave Anthony, and it's an American history podcast, and the one guy knows the story and the other guy doesn't, and the one comedian tells the other comedian the story, and they just kind of spitball back and forth. It's really goddamn funny. Really, really funny.
People probably like that if they like listening to a podcast where one person knows what they're talking about and the other one doesn't.
I don't really appreciate that. So anyway, check that out. Check out
I'll give a shout out for Slow Burn. It's a podcast by Slate, and they do deep dives into historical events. There's one about Tupac and Biggie, one about Watergate. Mm-hmm. It's a good listen if you got a lot of time to kill.
I like that. Another good one is there's one that it's now probably a couple years old, but I never heard of it. I visited Boston not too long ago and checked out the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, which is an art museum. It's like a private collection in downtown Chicago. Never heard of it, didn't know anything about it, but went and checked it out, and then ended up learning about this crazy art heist from years ago, and then found out later that the NPR station in Boston created a 8-part kind of serial style mystery on the theft. I forget the name of the podcast offhand, but if you search Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum podcast, I'm sure it'll pop up. So check that out. I thought it was awesome. It's super interesting. So
if you came for a podcast where we recommend other podcasts that we can't think of the name of, you're at the right spot.
Whatever, dude. We're all in this together, and as we keep this podcast going through our lockdown, we will continue to share recommendations on anything else that we want, because
I like that.
We got to pass time. So Dylan, you wanted to talk a little bit about Indianapolis first. I was there. You smartly
I was not there.
were not.
I was reading the tea leaves there a little bit. Honestly, that whole week was just surreal because it felt like almost seeing a car crash coming in slow motion. Like, I've been following what was going on in Europe and their sports leagues there, and it was like, how is this not going to happen here? I know the Manchester City Arsenal game got canceled the day before, or postponed, I guess. And it was like, how is this positive test going to happen? And then that all went down. It was crazy to see it happen. And there was just sort of a doom that made it hard for me to even really get into college basketball that week, in a week where usually I'm watching every little minute of college basketball, any tournament, anything.
Yeah. I mean, you were pretty ahead on this one. I will give you credit on that. The podcast name is Last Scene. So for anyone interested. So I went down there, obviously, and went to the arena. When I flew in Wednesday, went into the arena Wednesday night, and it was definitely eerie because they had already announced that fans were not going to be allowed there the next day. But meanwhile, there were 8,000 people there that night. It was the first game was Minnesota Northwestern, and then the second game was Nebraska Indiana. Thankfully, I skipped the second game and went to dinner. So myself and Dane O'Neill and Pat Forty and the great Dick Girardi were out to dinner. Shannon Ryan from the Chicago Tribune. We're having this great steak. St. Elmo's, right, doing the thing. Blah, blah, blah. And then all of our phones start buzzing about Hoiberg. And it's just like, and that's when it was like, we all knew what was happening. At that point, I was pretty convinced that Thursday's games were already going to be canceled. And then the Hoiberg thing went down, and we're all like, well, this is kind of going next level. And then the Rudy Gobert thing. Did I pronounce his name correctly? Yeah,
Rudy Gobert. Rudy Gobert's test was before the Hoiberg situation, I think. So it came out
same night, right?
It was the same night,
right.
It was all in that sort of span when you were probably enjoying your nice steak.
Yeah, it was very much, we were treating it like the Last Supper. So, and it was the next day though was unlike anything I've ever seen, or certainly hope to never experience again, because it was definitely spooky. Showing up in an empty arena, and I had been told by a couple people, like, just because we're here, don't expect this game to happen. There's still meetings happening in real time, and this thing might get the plug pulled immediately. And I tweeted that, and most people seem to ignore it. But then, the teams come out, and it was just this kind of, I'm sitting there thinking back to like the day after plane crash, Michigan, them coming out with their practice uniforms on, and all of us thinking, man, look at how crazy this is. And I'm like, well, that is nothing. This is the strangest thing I've ever seen. If thousands of people can't be here, then why can hundreds of people be here? This doesn't really make any sense. Meanwhile, the players' families are locked outside. And then suddenly, 20 minutes beforehand, they just say, clear the court. And both teams are sent to the locker room. The announcement came publicly. And then it was, all right, we're going to have a press conference with the Big Ten commissioner. And then you have 60 minutes to vacate the press conference area. Players are being shuttled out of like quarantined hallways. It was out of a movie. So, that's the story from Indy.
Yeah, it was. What do you think about how long it took to call it, as far as bringing the teams there? It just seemed like a lot when the wheels are probably already in motion. I don't know. I get that it's hard, and it seems like an interesting dynamic between some pressure from maybe people that really want the game to be played, and maybe like conference or team, like university administrators, presidents, etc., who are like, this is ridiculous. Right. And that seemed to be kind of what dragged on. You agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, there were a million different agendas at play here. You had the city of Indianapolis. You had the TV network. You had 14 individual schools. You had one conference. Like, everyone trying to work in concert together. It's really hard to have like just one person step forward and say, I'm making this decision. It's not happening, and that's it. Like, I agree with you that like second guessing can be something that can be done ad nauseum, but like at the same time, you know, Big East went ahead with a game, which is just insane. And like everyone there that morning, I felt like knew it was not a good idea to be there. The biggest question I would have about why did you go forward was, as of Wednesday night, there was no chance of playing on Friday. You know, like, what was the point of Thursday? If you're not getting, my thing, like I said to a number of people that morning there was, if we're not getting to Sunday, why are we bothering with today? Let's just get the hell out of here. Everyone be safe. Everyone, you know, are they going to ground, like, no, I didn't know if they were going to ground planes. I didn't know what the hell was going on. But I was like, if we're not getting to Sunday, let's not do today. Let's everyone get the hell out of here.
But not getting to Sunday means the whole season's probably over, which is why everyone was so hesitant to do that. Because if you don't get to Sunday, you're not getting to Selection Sunday, and then what are you doing, right? So I get that it takes a while. It also just shows how hard it is to get anything done related to anything in the NCAA when you have so many people at work, different factions, right? And there's no clear decision maker as there is in maybe like a pro league or whatever, right? It's very disjointed, which was interesting to see how that all played out as far as this president says they're not playing, this school says they're not recruiting until April, and then eventually the NCAA just has to issue guidelines that match that. But it's interesting just how the conference tournaments really illustrate how the conferences have power, teams have power, the NCAA has power, and it's just kind of a discombobulated mess.
And there was a overwhelming gravity kind of to the decision of, you know, if you cancel this, that means you cancel Selection Sunday. If you cancel Selection Sunday, that means the NCAA tournament does not happen. And like that is like improbable for the people who are in charge of all of the entities that I said before. Like the financial. I don't want to use like any. I don't want to be like too hyperbolic, but like the just how much is reliant on that singular event is just mind-boggling, and it goes so far beyond I think what average fan would normally expect. Like there are nearly 100 NCAA championships that are put on every year that you never hear of, from the Division III tennis championship held outside of Tulsa. Like I'm just making shit. Like there's a million of it. All of those things are financed by the NCAA tournament. And so it's just like that's the thing. It's not the head of the snake, it's the snake, right? It's the whole thing. So that I think weighed into, and that's why I've been pretty hesitant of like going out there and ripping the NCAA, ripping conferences and stuff like that. It was a really hard thing, and it's not like, if the country is allowing you to hold this event, then who are you to say otherwise? There's a lot going on there, but people weren't laughing at the Ivy League anymore, I can tell you that much.
No, and it's crazy how 3 days changes how everyone looks at the world. It's like less than a week later, and it's like, wow, I can't imagine they were going to play that when 3 days ago everyone was like, this is ridiculous, play the games. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's crazy how fast all that happens, and I guess the question now might be how long it takes to get to what happens next, right? Now you're looking at the recruiting calendar, you're looking at all these things, and basically every athletic department is shut down. Like what happens when you don't have practices, you don't have team events, you don't have recruiting? It's sort of stuck in this in-between period. It seems like one of the only things that's still moving along is the transfer portal. People have no problem hopping in there. But you can't go on a visit. So what are you doing, right? Like, what happens to the NBA draft process? There's so many questions right now that I don't even know where to start, really, about what happens next. Because usually the end of season to start of the new season is just so immediate, right? First thing any coach does after they lose in the NCAA tournament is get on a plane and see what state tournament game they can get to or what transfer they can visit. That's not happening now.
No, and it's like, and we can sit here and speculate on, I bet that they do this, I bet they do that. I have no idea what they do on any of these decisions. There's already been stuff floated about eligibility and stuff like that, I can't fathom a world in which like seniors are giving another year. That's just because you didn't get a chance to play in the NCAA tournament. I've heard that put out there. There's just no way that that's going to be a thing. Spring sports is a different story, but these guys, they played their season. So I don't think that's a thing. Also, it would turn the scholarship situation kind of on its head a little bit.
Yeah, to be fair, spring sports will probably turn the scholarship situation
right, but those guys literally didn't get to play their seasons. Those guys and girls, I should say.
I completely. I mean, they've played like 10%. It's more like a medical redshirt amount, right? So I agree with that. I can't imagine many seniors actually deciding months from now that I want to come back and go to school. Like, it's time for people to start their life a little bit here, right? Like whether that's being a pro athlete or being just a graduate adult who goes and gets a job, right? Like, coming back to go to a whole nother year of school, go through all that just because you didn't make the NCAA tournament. Like, no, it just doesn't make sense to me. I don't think there's no guarantee you're going to make the NCAA tournament if you come back for another year. Right. And what happens to seniors who already weren't qualified for the NCAA tournament? There's so many questions that you just never really be able to sort through. I think it would be a mistake, but I keep seeing mentions of it and people keep talking about it like it's something they're discussing. I don't know what that would ever look like, though.
Yeah, that just doesn't make sense. The only chance that you would see any of these guys in, when I say these guys, I mean like a Cassius Winston in a Michigan State uniform again would be if there is somehow someone comes up with some kind of plan to play a version of this thing in the summer because everything else is pushed back. Like maybe literal actual calendars are changed. Like the NBA season, the NBA has talked for a long time about moving its season entirely to get away from NFL football. Like, this could be something that just sparks that. It would make a degree of sense. Everything's fucked up now, so why not? If you're going to do a drastic change, like me, I'm trying to lose some weight, so I gotta use a quarantine. So but point being, if you're gonna move a season, you can, if whole slots of the calendar are changing, maybe something like that. But there's like a 2% chance of anything like that, I would think. Yeah, I mean, calendars are going to move. It's just the amount of work it would take to put together a backward-looking tournament just seems like a lot of extra effort that wouldn't really play out. And a lot of guys who want to go to the NBA. Yeah, or get paid anywhere, right? It's time to not be playing for free anymore for a lot of these people, wherever they're going. Yes. The NBA calendar is really interesting, though, because it doesn't seem like anyone really has a clue what's going to happen with that. You're not going to be going around doing workouts with people. The combine can't happen, right? I don't know what. Those are some of the immediate decisions that are going to impact programs across the country, and it's just completely up in there. Yes. Yeah, I have no idea what to even speculate on that. I imagine there will still be a draft, right? When? I have no idea. Like, the NBA season won't be over by the time the draft's scheduled. So if you don't have a draft order, there's just so many questions there. And what does that do for, you're talking about building your roster. You're going to need to know if people are going pro or not, but they're not going to know when the draft is. Right. They're not going to know where things really stand. So it's going to be. And I think you'd have to almost condense, unless you're completely changing the schedule for the 2020, what would it be? Next season. So 2020-21. Unless you're literally moving that entire season forward, you basically just have to have a condensed off season of no summer league, right? That's out the window. You basically finish this year whenever you can, and then you basically have to go draft and free agency in a tight window, and then make your rosters for the following year. Maybe you play a condensed schedule next year. I have no idea. The NBA, it's crazy. Same thing with the NHL. Baseball, at least it hasn't really started, but the NFL is going to sit there with its stakes in the ground. There's no way they're doing anything. The NBA ties so closely into the college calendar. That's what makes it so complicated. I could see a situation where you just set some kind of draft order
and maybe still go through with like the draft before the season. Like it could overlap with some of that stuff. I don't know. Do you come back and say we're just gonna play like a postseason? You know what I mean? I don't know. It's gonna be a weird spot and directly tied to what these rosters are gonna look like in college.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I also think the NCAA should probably lift temporarily. So, like, if there is some kind of situation where there are guys who need to declare under unclear circumstances, like calendar-wise, like you need to make an announcement by this date. Well, if that date means nothing in terms of the NBA calendar, you need to basically waive all of that shit. That's all.
All the dates are based on the combine and this and that.
Exactly.
So the NBA is going to have to come up with some sort of announcement to move some of that stuff, though, I think, because the NCAA rules are tied directly to that.
Right.
The other big issue the big change is that the April grassroots, like the first evaluation period, is off the board. So who knows when coaches will evaluate 2021 guys. The All-American games off the board. So all of that sort of typical spring recruiting period is out the window. And it's going to be for Michigan State, schools like that, it might not matter a ton because they're not evaluating that closely compared to mid-majors, low majors. But there's going to be a lot of people flying blind recruiting-wise to prioritize based on whatever film you can find, this and that. And that's going to have an impact. Probably kids that don't get scholarships, kids that get overrated, underrated.
And frankly, here, you're right, and like that, it is a thing. At the same time, like, okay, so they're basically going to recruit the way they did in like 1980. It's not like that huge of a deal. Like so much of that summer circuit shit is sitting there with your polo on with your school logo just to be there to be seen. Like the amount of actual evaluation is what percent do you think?
I think it varies based on the level of program. Kentucky, Michigan State, it's recruiting, it's not evaluating. St. Joe's, I mean, they're evaluating. They're like schools like lower tier.
But they also already know who they're basically going to see. I'm just saying, like, there's a lot of film on guys. There are still ways.
There are new ways to evaluate now that weren't available in the past, right? There's a lot of video out there of kids. It's still, you're going to recruit more based on word of mouth. You're going to recruit more based on what local scouts. And are high school kids allowed to play organized basketball in any sense, right? Like, kids aren't even going to be playing basketball, right? I don't even know how that'll work. There's not going to be summer leagues and I don't know, right? Because even when it's not an evaluation period, people are playing places normally, and I don't think there's going to be AAU tournaments anywhere in this era of social distancing. So it's just a whole class that won't really be evaluated nationally at all.
Yeah, I mean, you do feel especially bad, I feel like, for the lower guys who, you know, maybe you're a low major recruit, you're looking for the mid-major offer. You're a mid-major recruit, you're looking for the high major offer. This is when all that stuff happens. I'm just saying, it's not like rosters aren't getting filled out. Like, you know,
that's true. But
a lot of guys know who we're targeting and things like that. I don't know what to make of, you know, guys having to make decisions on not visiting schools though. Like that's pretty wild.
Hopefully, have some good virtual tours set up on the online site there,
and it's going to be like the coaching carousel is kind of like wobbling into a spin. You know, some places have made moves, but you do wonder still, you know, if there's like a big mover made while this stuff is going on, like, and actual like big time jobs get open, like. Okay, what's going to happen at Western Michigan? Well, okay, Western Michigan's going to hire who it hires, but like if there's a move made that has like an actual domino effect amid all of this, like that could get things pretty damn crazy too.
Could there be big moves later when things get started up again?
Oh, of course.
Would you wait to fire a coach if you're, say, a Power 5 school and you're thinking about making a change? It might make a lot more sense to wait it out.
Unless I want to hire a certain guy who's unemployed and sitting in isolation right now with no tape to watch.
Yeah, it's an interesting
who's
question,
about like 3 miles from my house. More than that, but you get my point.
You see the question I'm asking, though,
Yeah.
right? Like,
yeah,
your coach, like your players aren't going to be on campus in a lot of situations. It'd be an awkward transition.
I thought it was crazy for these schools that fired guys as this was happening in real time. I get it. It's a business and all that, but that was fucked up. Like, some of these guys have kids who are like trying to figure out the coronavirus, and you're just like, well, you're fired. So add that to the mix too. Not cool.
Yeah, it's not great.
It just seemed unnecessary.
Yeah, it's just
the only one that made sense was Iona. That was brilliant.
How many jobs are even open right now? Western, I know.
Grand Canyon got filled today.
Grand Canyon got filled by Drew.
Western,
I just can't imagine it.
I think
eating up.
One of the directional Illinois jobs are open, but I think they fired the guy before all this shit happened. I don't know if they made a hire. Yeah, but like, you like look at a place like DePaul, right, where it's like, okay, what are they going to do? Is now really the time to pull the trigger on that? You feel like you just got to, even if you hire a guy, what is he going to do?
Exactly. You're better off just sticking and idling with what you've got, even if you make a change at maybe a less normal time later.
And you got to figure that everyone's like us. Everyone's hoping, right, that this is several weeks instead of several months. Because if it's several weeks, then it's like, okay, yes, we lost the NCAA tournament and it's devastating and we're all sad and a lot of people lost money and a lot of people lost, important opportunities in their lives and things like that. But like, in terms of structurally changing the way that we know and understand things to be, we can get by on several weeks, several months. I got nothing, man. I have no idea.
Yeah, I think structure's out the window when the entire college basketball is structured around Selection Sunday, and that goes away. You can't assume anything at this point. We're just going to see where this ends up as we go. You want to talk a little bit about kind of season wrap for Michigan State, Michigan?
I don't even remember what happened.
Don't even remember. It's crazy for both teams in my mind, just that both seasons were going to be defined by what they did in the NCAA tournament. Like, you don't come back as a senior point guard to worry about much other than making a Final Four. Like, if you would have asked anyone in either of those locker rooms who had been around for a while what the goal was this season, I think it would be to get to the Final Four at the very least, right? From either team. And to just not even have that chance, it's just sort of like, how do you even make sense of it? It's a tough spot.
Yeah, it is. Obviously, we feel terrible for the seniors and all that stuff. Everyone does. I mean, you forget in hindsight that this was like Juwan Howard's first year as Michigan basketball coach, right? Like, you could sit here and break that down for hours, and now it just seems like it was, almost just a caveat of information to this monster that ended, the stories of these seasons. You know what I mean?
We spent all summer wondering what Juwan Howard would be as a coach. We got all these data points all season, and we were just waiting to figure out what to put the final grade on the body of work. And then it's like, well, don't get that. Wait another year. Right? I mean, it was the big question, and now there's no answer.
No answer. So, I mean, what will be do you feel like when we get past this, get through this, what do you think will be kind of your takeaways of not only the Michigan season, I'd say, but like the program moving forward with Juwan Howard? I think that's still very much a conversation.
Yeah, this year was such a transition year as far as not just a new coach, but it was like a bridge year, right? You have two seniors, and you're bridging this gap between the way Beeline ran his program, the way Juwan Howard's going to run his program. You don't often have a coach come in who has a roster that's basically already there, right? Very little change he didn't bring in a bunch of guys yet. He didn't send a bunch of guys packing like you see a lot of times. So this was how he coached with a roster that by and large he didn't build. Mm-hmm. And I think he passed a lot of tests as far as coaching ability, drawing up plays. Like offensively, Michigan was surpassed any expectation I had. Mm-hmm. Now we dive into this deep end of what does a Juwan Howard roster look like. He's bringing in his guys. I don't know how many assumptions you can even draw from how Michigan played this year to how it'll play next year. Mm-hmm. I think you can assess the fact that he played a certain way with the pieces he had, which says something about his coaching acumen and adaptability. But I don't know that you're running 25, 30 ball screens a game next year with the roster you have potentially to work with. I think you could see that changing completely, right? So that's my first impression of how hard it is to figure out what you take and what you say, well, that was a product of the situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to figure out or even imagine what this looks like without Xavier Simpson. I mean, he's just such an overwhelming figure in everything that's done. So, yeah, like, is Eli Brooks or David DeJulius someone who's going to have the ball in their hands as much as Xavier Simpson this year? I can't imagine. No. So, do you agree with that?
Completely agree with that.
Okay.
You're not running the offense through either of those players the way you did. It's not anything against either of those players. It's just a product of their ability, experience, and the other pieces on the roster.
Mm-hmm. And I get the sense that coming in, Juwan Howard didn't like have a version of the way that he wanted to run his shop, and that what we saw was it. I think he came in, looked at the film from last year, saw how Xavier Simpson was used, and said, should probably just pretty much do that with my own tweaks and whatnot. And that's pretty much what they did. Now I feel like you're starting this. I feel like is when last year was beeline to Howard, right? In terms of who's the guy sitting in the chair. This year, I feel like is actually the program starting over. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, it's certainly, I would say it'd be a bigger Band-Aid ripped off than last year, just because you're moving on from Simpson. It's a whole new spectrum.
Just in terms of the product on the court. Yeah, in terms of what you actually see, on those 94 feet. Yeah, I think that's right.
I think you'll see, because now you're looking at 5, 6, however many players end up coming in, and they're players that Juwan recruited to how he wants to play, not that he designed a way to play based on how players he already has play. And he's shown like he does a great job of borrowing offensive sets from all over the place. Mm-hmm. Like Michigan would run a set for Isaiah Livers quite a bit that the Miami Heat love to run for Duncan Robinson, and he just throws that in and they run it, right? So in the NBA, you adapt your offensive style to the players you have. Obviously, you have a philosophy, but the coach doesn't pick the players in the NBA, right? So you coach in a sense that this is what I have. This is how we can best use it. So I think Michigan has 1,000,000 6'7", 6'8", 6'9" guys on the roster next year. I think you'll play completely differently.
Yeah, and if anything, if you were looking for good news for Michigan, you avoided the potential Michigan makes a run to the Elite Eight with Franz Wagner and Isaiah Livers dominating teams, and then suddenly they're gone for next year too. Seeing that story, how many dudes are going to be back in college next year because they didn't get the opportunity to show out in the postseason? I wouldn't say it's a lot, but I'd say there's probably 10 guys.
Yeah, Franz Wagner had been playing so well for 3 or 4 weeks. I mean, he was on track to all of a sudden be a guy everyone's talking about if he had 2 big games in the NCAA tournament. Isaiah Livers also had been struggling with his injury and whatnot, but he easily could have put together a couple games and been much more prevalent in those discussions. And now he's just sort of, both of those guys there's no opportunity to play yourself into that conversation really, right? We don't even know if there's going to be workouts, interviews, whatever. It's just it's an uphill slope now to try to play your way into the picture when you don't even know what the situation is.
Right. Yeah, you can't just declare and say, hey, I'm going to play my way into the first round by going to the combine if there's no combine.
or you're not going to fly around to every
right
facility and shake everyone's hand and work out. No, that's not happening.
I bet you. I mean, Juwan's probably got a helicopter he could pass around a little bit, but okay. So, do we want to get into next year's roster because it's pretty up in the air?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard right now. You're over the scholarship limit. Michigan's been involved in already reaching out to different transfers. You have Josh Christopher. You have potentially some form of attrition from the roster going out just based on the situation. There's not a lot of concrete thing you can say, oh yeah, lock this in, lock that in.
Right.
But there's a lot of pieces to move around the whiteboard also.
Yeah, I can tell you I've got the refresh button going on the transfer portal. I would certainly still expect to see possibly some movement there. But it's so hard. Like, they've contact with 2 different grad transfers right now. Frankly, I don't see either happening because I just don't see the opportunity there. I don't see this as an attractive spot for a grad transfer in terms of playing opportunities. Do you?
Yeah, the 2 guys you're talking about are Seth Towns and Bryce Aiken, who are both transferring from Harvard. Towns is announcing this week and will probably commit to Ohio State. Mm-hmm. I definitely don't see the roster fit for him, given that he's 6'7", and it seems like every piece on Michigan's roster who you pencil into play is some sort of combo forward.
Right.
Aiken, I can see a little more the roster fit. We just talked about there's no one you're going to just let pound the ball 30 times of possession. There's a guy to replace who did that, and I could see that being somewhat attractive. I don't think there's a slam dunk starter at point guard on Michigan's roster next year. So if you're a point guard who wants to play high major, and it's not a terrible opportunity. I mean, if you were a point guard grad transfer, would you not want to be used like Xavier Simpson was used last year?
Yeah. No, I mean, I certainly see your point.
I mean, the whole of Michigan's roster.
Like, Aiken played, didn't he play like 8 games last year? And I know he can get buckets, but it's also in the Ivy League.
He's been hurt.
He's been hurt
his career
throughout most of his time, yes. He can certainly, score the hell out of the ball when he is healthy. But it's just like, look, especially when you're over, like, it'd be one thing if Michigan was 2 or 3 under the scholarship limit. Like, yeah, bring the guy in, but it's like, to bring in a guy, I don't know. I mean, I kind of feel like Eli Brooks and DeJulius have at least have a place in this program for next year, and it's just if you bring in a third guard that size, what you're going to have one of those guys have to transfer out basically if you bring in Aiken.
But if you look at the roster, Eli Brooks and David DeJulius are basically the only guys under 6'4", who the only guys under 6'4" on the roster other than Zeb Jackson as a freshman, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have
Zeb. I forgot about Zeb.
You don't have a lot of perimeter depth to begin with, even if you have those 3. I mean, perimeter depth was a big issue for Michigan this year, and they had 3 guys under 6'4", right? I mean, so if you were going to add to this roster, it would be in the backcourt. Now, obviously, Josh Christopher could fill some of those roles, right?
Right. And
that would be, like, that's the position you'd add, but that's just the situation you're looking at. There's not a lot of guards, right? What if a guard transfers, whatever else? I mean, there's so many things that could happen.
Sure.
So I get that. I didn't understand Seth Towns at all because he's the same sort of role as so many guys on the roster. The other thing is a school like Michigan is somewhat limited as far as what grad transfers you can pursue.
I think they can take the kid from Harvard.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Like, a Harvard grad transfer is you're going to call him right away.
Sure.
Based on other options that aren't always as possible, right? So you're limited. You have to look at what's out there, and it's at least worth a phone call. I wouldn't read too much more into that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And these kids can't visit anywhere, so it's a tricky spot.
Right. I mean, and it's, with the guarantee to Austin Davis to come back, it's Christopher would put them at 2 over. That's not including unless Jace is walking on or there's some kind of something there. No matter what, they're over. I've not seen or been told anything to make me walk away from my previous thought that I think Joshua Christopher is almost definitely coming here.
Exactly.
So
you have, but there's going to be transfers. I think that's a safe assumption too, outward.
Yes. Let's hit reset. Let's see if anyone pops up right now. No, we got someone from High Point though. Curtis Holland. Anything else on the roster?
No, I think that's the situation. I mean, I find the center position is probably worth talking about a little bit.
I also think the staff is too, but let's talk center.
Fair. So you have Austin Davis come back as a 5th year. I know a lot of people liked how Austin played down the stretch. He played above any level that he really had in his entire career. I think he basically proved that he can play a role off the bench. Mm-hmm. I also don't know if there's really a ceiling there beyond 10 or 15 minutes a game at the max, right? And John Teskey, for all of his perceived faults and whatnot, was one of the most reliable, minute-eating, roll man, defensive bigs in the conference. Like, I know Michigan fans got frustrated as he struggled posting up a little bit.
Sure.
But him to anyone is going to be a big defensive downgrade for Michigan at the 5, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And you're looking at Austin Davis and Hunter Dickinson and Colin Castleton as your centers. You're going to struggle to defend ball screens quite a bit.
I don't think that this is a program that has intentions of playing a true 5 for bulk minutes anyway.
You want to elaborate?
Like, we're talking centers here, but like, I feel like a guy like Brandon Johns is going to see a lot more time at the 5 next year. I feel like, I don't know. Isaiah Todd is a guy who's going to play as that stretch 5 athletic guy. I just don't.
I think that makes sense with the roster. It also was not something Michigan did very often this year.
Well,
which is
sometimes
at least worth pointing out.
I thought they were going that way a little bit before Liver's injury. No? Am I misremembering?
Yeah. It happened in the Oregon game, and then it was something that happened in different games, but was never an emphasis, I would say.
Right.
Which makes it hard to look at next year's roster and say, I definitely think that the emphasis is going to be on going small. I mean, that hasn't been Juwan Howard's emphasis.
And the hard part is Juwan doesn't answer questions like that either. When you ask him basketball-specific things like that, he does not give answers. So we could sit here and say, when you visualize this program, do you constantly see, multiple true 5 men and, centers, true centers? Or
Good luck getting an answer there.
Right. There's just no chance that he answers that question. So
all you can do is judge based on what we've seen.
Like, I think the fact that he signed Hunter Dickinson. So, I mean, he sees a role for true centers, no doubt. But there's a difference between that and, what we saw this year, where basically all 40 minutes of a game were played with a true post center.
Yeah, I don't think he's shown anything to make me think he won't try to play, maybe not 40 minutes, but to play true centers more often than not. So it'll be interesting how that plays out. I'm at least curious how that plays out, given how the roster has a abundance of combo forwards and a lack of, I guess, just versatile centers, right? Like, Colin Castleton could be that guy, and it's not fair to write him off given that we've seen big men develop at different speeds, but the Dickinson-Davis pairing is not great defensively. Maybe Michigan plays 2-3 zone every time down the court. We don't know. You want to talk about the coaching staff a little?
Yeah, I'd be curious if, gun to my head, I'll say I don't think this staff will be back in its present form next year. I think you will see at least one change. I got to think Sadie Washington is very well positioned for a good shot at that Western job.
It almost makes too much sense.
Exactly. It's one of those, like, I wouldn't say his to lose, because if he doesn't get it, I don't want to make it seem like, he did something wrong, but like, he's the first name on everyone's mind for that gig. So, that could create an opening. Still curious to see what happens at Boston College. If they decide to make a move, Howard Isley's name will probably be thrown around there a little bit. And Phil Martelli, if there are, I feel like his is a name that will land on a lot of places, right? Just as hey, Phil Martelli's out there, and it will certainly field some calls, I'd imagine, of asking about willingness to get involved with searches. The question that I have is, what are the level of those calls? I don't think Phil Martelli is getting a high major call, right? If a really good mid-major is open, if a good Atlantic 10 is open, if something back in the Philly area, right, say Inglesby at Delaware gets a job, if Delaware comes open, is that something that he'd be, you know what I mean? Like, there's just a million. That's the thing when you're someone with kind of Martelli's reputation. You could sit here and come up with a million different scenarios that involve him getting a call. So with all three of those guys in those three scenarios, I would put the odds greater that the current staff is not intact next year. Yeah,
the lack of sort of acceleration in the coaching carousel, though, also makes some of those a little trickier. Sadi's the obvious candidate where the motion already took place, where there's an opportunity that makes sense for him and could be a great opportunity for him that I think he's probably earned based on everything he's done at Michigan, his experience, right? If you were to replace, like, it'd be interesting. Would you see a situation where you hire promote internally to replace a coach, or is there something you would think that the staff would need to address? Like, a lot of times, like, you think about Michigan under Beeline bringing in a defensive assistant. Like, is there something that you would, a recruiter, a local guy? Obviously, Sadi's the only Michigan coach on the staff currently.
Yeah, so I could certainly see Chris Hunter getting a well-deserved look. My gut, though, and this is just my absolute guess, is that you might see kind of a situation where maybe he brings in a guy like a Chris Quinn, who's currently an assistant with the Heat, and he's been there for a while. I think I don't know if he's an assistant. He might actually be like their player development guy, but like he's a dude who you could bring in, or no, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at it now. He is an assistant. He actually might have bumped up when Juwan left. But like maybe a scenario like that, right? You bring in another guy from the NBA. He's on the same page as Juwan. He can recruit. He's got a name. Maybe he wants a college head job, right? You spend 1 or 2 years as an assistant at Michigan. You're well positioned to go hop up and get a high major job, right? So maybe a situation like that.
And that helps you really brand as we're an NBA type program, right? And I think for all the talk about assistants this year, Howard Isley's name kind of wasn't mentioned nearly as much because not really a big talker, but it seems like for all the talk was that he had a huge impact on Michigan's offense, and Michigan's offense was pretty damn good considering the situation as far as drawing up plays, running stuff, like making adjustments in games offensively. I think the NBA influence on Michigan's offense was pretty clear, so it would make sense to have another kind of X's and O's guy from that level. It'd be an interesting way to push the program in that direction, right?
And it's not like, NBA assistants are not making just like crazy money where like this is something that, like, I don't know if the average listener doesn't have like an idea and just hears like, why would you leave an NBA assistant job or a college assistant job? Financially, it's not that dramatic. These guys aren't making $1 million or anything.
It's true. That'll be interesting. And again, we just don't know how that process will go as far as.
I forgot Malik Allen. That's another one. Malik Allen's in his first year as an assistant at Miami. You might remember him from Villanova. That'd be interesting.
All right.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, we don't know how this coaching situation is really going to go, because we could see stuff changing based on when calendars are announced and whatever else when things try to start back up again. Any other thing on Michigan, or should we talk a little Michigan State?
Hop into Michigan State if you want to start off.
All right, so I guess big picture, I guess we can look back kind of on Michigan State's season first, then look forward on the roster. What do you make of the season? Obviously, win the Big Ten. It's the same for Michigan as me, where the only thing, like, this season was about getting back to the Final Four, and it's especially bittersweet because Michigan State probably would have been that 3 seed in everyone's bracket that everyone would have picked to the Final Four, right?
1,000%.
That doesn't mean you're going to make the Final Four, but that's exactly where Michigan State was they would have been the 9th highest, 8th highest team on the S curve, and everyone would have picked them in the Final Four.
Absolutely.
So that's how I would set the stage for what Michigan State missed out on. Tough. How would you evaluate it?
It is. I think that's the word for it, man. It's just like tough. You feel so shitty for everyone involved in considering the year that transpired there, to not get the shot for a payoff for going through all of that is, I feel like any Michigan fan out there should even recognize just how brutal that is, and you just feel terrible for Cassius Winston. I actually have a story. I was supposed to have a story running this week on like a little kind of side human interest thing that would have just gone by the wayside if we just didn't run it this week. So I just said, fuck it, we're just running it tomorrow anyway. So look forward to that if you're interested. But and Izzo, I mean, you're talking about a guy who's been in this epic journey for this second championship, right? This white whale that's out there. And hey, man, you look around this, who you'd have to go through to get to a championship this year, not that overly daunting. Maybe this would have been it. I don't know. I can tell you who's going to be wondering if this was it for probably the rest of his life. It's Tom Izzo. This is going to haunt him. So, yeah, that sucks. It all sucks, really, is what it boils down to for everyone. It sucks for Kyle Arns, right? Like, guy had was the bionic man. He's been rebuilt and put back together and all this stuff, and now he doesn't get a payoff. And it's a bad deal, man. It's a raw deal. So the flip side of that,
go ahead.
They were the Big Ten champions.
Yeah, they won.
You're right. That last night, it shouldn't have been there last night, but at least there was, at least he got a standing ovation to leave to. At least they got a party. A banner. I saw him tweet, or somebody tweet, like, I went out a champion, and that is 100% true, so there is that. But, you're just going to be stuck with what if for a really long time with this group, because you don't get to see Cassius Winston and Xavier Tillman play together again.
Unless the NCAA changes eligibility rules. Okay. No, but I completely agree. And it's such a weird season because there were 2 periods where everyone was trying to sell everything about Michigan State and just bail on that team. But I think to have that last 2 or 3 weeks of the season where they came together and came back to win the Big Ten title is definitely the way that this team should probably be remembered, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Just based on everything that they had been through up to that point, it is a fitting way to go out. I mean, of all the ways that teams finished their season this year, Michigan State probably had one of the happiest ending, right? Other than teams that won an auto bid or something like that, right? Like, that was the perfect kind of culmination of the regular season, without a doubt.
Yeah. And there's a lot to look forward to for this team. A lot. I think what they have coming back, I mean, losing Cassius Winston is not a minor deal. But,
no.
It's kind of the same thing like we were talking about with Franz Wagner and Isaiah Livers, right? Xavier Tillman was just very quietly probably the most underrated player in college basketball this year. And I think we talked about it on this podcast, like, if he went into the NCAA tournament and shut down Obi Toppin and Azubuike on back-to-back games, he's suddenly a top 20 pick in the draft, and goodbye. He still probably has a decision to make right now. I mean, here's the thing. If it's, look, I gotta go and make money because I have a family, then whatever, wherever you get picked, who gives a shit? And he has every right. But if he is looking for some level of, I want to know I'm a lottery pick, I want to know I'm a first-round pick, I don't know if you're getting that right now. So, Tillman has a decision to make that I think would have probably been a lot easier if he had played in the NCAA tournament. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously both have raved about him for weeks on the podcast, but that exposure of doing it on that stage, if Michigan State were to make a run, and it would have changed the situation for him without a doubt. And he's a guy that if he comes back, I think he's first-team All-American potential just based on what that roster would look like and the things that he's been able to do. You don't get senior All-American candidates very often, so it would be a hell of a first building block for Tom Izzo, without a doubt.
For sure.
It's interesting, though. I don't really know how the pieces fit beyond him for Michigan State's roster next year. I guess my first big question is Rocket Watts a point guard on that team? Is Rocket Watts a point guard or a two guard?
On this team, point guard.
And just what is he?
This team, he's a point guard. The roster's the roster.
What does that look like?
I have no idea.
I mean, he could be a point guard and have the third lowest. So probably will have the third lowest assist rate on the team behind Tillman and Henry, I would say, right? Like, does Henry grow into more of a playmaking wing? Like, I have so many questions about how it fits together, right? Like, one of the better things Aaron Henry did this year was improve his passing, if you ask me.
Mm-hmm.
And if he can continue to cut down on his turnovers, maybe you put the ball in his hands more, because Watts needs to score.
Yeah,
right? Like, you don't want Watts to try to be a passer when he's passing it to Aaron Henry. You almost would rather have Henry do some of that creation and then pass it to Watts in scoring situations, right? It's a weird dynamic to fill out. I think adding Hauser will really make it a different but dynamic group, right? I mean, his shooting and kind of stretchability, right? Like, he could be a better passer than Rocket Watts.
True.
I mean, he's got some of that playmaking too.
Well, they have an open scholarship. I think this would be the ideal landing place in the country for a point guard, obviously. That could very well still happen.
Bryce Aiken said he wants to hear from Michigan State.
That would make a whole hell of a lot more sense than Michigan.
I don't understand. That's the exact same situation. I don't understand how it's
different. It isn't?
Both have a point guard that did everything graduate.
Okay. Michigan has Eli Brooks and David Julius to play point guard next year. Michigan State has Rocket Watts, who is not a true point guard, who you're gambling on a little bit.
Eli Brooks a true point guard? I'm just curious why
you can run the point at Michigan.
Situations.
And then you have Foster Loyer, who I think has proven that is. I would feel much more comfortable going into a year with a David DeJulius or an Eli Brooks as a starting point guard than I would Foster Loyer. And AJ Hoggard's a freshman, and I don't even know if he's a true point guard.
Okay, that's fair.
So
I just think they're similar in many respects as far as adding a point guard, or as the need for a point guard.
Okay. Aaron Henry, I think, is going to be on everyone's short list for, big time junior year. Joey Hauser's pretty damn good. Everyone forgets about him. Who knows about Xavier Tillman? What does junior Gabe Brown look like? No idea. I like what I saw from Malik Hall in the last 3 weeks. But there are, I don't know what Marcus Bingham is. And going into next year, there is a lot of bigs on this roster. Right?
Oh, but
I mean, Xavier Tillman, Thomas Kithier, Marcus Bingham, Julius Marble, Hauser's a 4-5, more of a 4.
4-3 more, right?
I would think so, but will they want any of these other guys, or will they at some point play some small and put Hauser at the 5?
I don't
think so, but we'll see. So put Hauser at the 4. You also have Mehdi Sissoko.
Yeah.
It's 5 true 5 men, I think.
You didn't even mention Julius Marble, did you?
I thought I mentioned Marble. Sorry.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah,
Because
Tillman, Kithier, Bingham, Marble, Sissoko.
Marble might be the guy I buy more than, like...
Very similar game to Sissoko, too. They're very similar players.
Bingham and Kithier, I have a hard time kind of I get that Bingham has all the talent, but that can happen in a flash. Same thing we said about Castleton, but like Marble seems like a guy who I might look to make a jump more than maybe some of those other guys.
I'd agree.
The other thing is you have all these bigs. If Xavier Tillman leaves, you're worried about all of them replacing that, right? It's just such a critical decision. But if you have Tillman, I think you're completely fine having all these bodies and sorting through the mess to get production. You have,
right.
I mean, if you're bringing in Sissoko is like a top 50 guy, right? Top 40, something like that. I mean, there's plenty of depth at that spot next year, I think, with Tillman. Without Tillman, there's no one you can trust to give you great production, but there's a lot of guys that you can trust to produce as a whole. You agree with that?
I do. To answer your first question, though, which is by far the most important on Rocket, right now, going into next year, he's working to be the one.
That will be an experience. I mean, there's going to be some highs, there's going to be some lows. That's going to be a hell of a thing. Because he has the talent.
Sure.
I think you're gonna end up like Michigan State has had a lot of scoring ones in the past, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways that Michigan State can play offensively that doesn't rely on one guy handling the ball all the time and distributing.
Sure.
So, and I think when you have guys like Henry and
you can play through Henry in the top of the post, you can play through Tillman.
Play through Tillman's passing, I think you'll see a lot of that, and I think that's intriguing because it'll be a completely different Michigan State team. I mean, there'll still be things like the break and everything like that, but you're going to see some different emphasis that you haven't. It's just going to be so weird to see Michigan State without Cassius Winston after the last 4 years, right? Like that's just been Michigan State's identity, and you're not going to play the same way with Rocket Watts running the show as you would with Winston, without a doubt.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if Tillman's back, though, I still think will be. Where are they in the preseason? Top 15? So
Torvik has them 16th.
Okay.
I think top 15 sounds about right. Tillman's a huge factor, though. I mean, his decision is big. Do you think there's any potential roster attrition here? You think everyone's happy in their roles? That's another question. I mean,
I would never say that there's no chance of attrition anywhere, anytime. Especially if the new rule goes into effect.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about that. I mean, we don't know when people are transferred. We don't know if they're immediately eligible. That's who the hell knows. It's the motto of 2020 at this point. Any other Michigan State, who do you think is the best breakout candidate for Michigan State? And not just like Watts Henry, but maybe under the radar guy who didn't play as much this year.
I mean, in a perfect world for them, it's probably Gabe Brown.
Yeah, Gabe Brown. He was on his way there.
I know, it was crazy.
What happened?
I don't know. Maybe it was just a sophomore thing. You've seen it happen before. I mean, frankly, part of it was Rocket Watts. They weren't.
But I feel like Gabe Brown's descent started before Rocket's ascent. You agree with that? There was it seemed to be frustration with Gabe. Really, after he got the flu there, wasn't he sick for a game?
Yeah. And
then he's just never played his way back into the rotation. I don't think Watts had been dominant that whole time. I feel like it seemed to be he wasn't. I mean, maybe just simple as not making shots, but he wasn't really living up to expectations as far as where his role seemed to be going in January.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And the thing was, because of Rockets' defense and because of Aaron Henry's defense, he wasn't going to get a chance to play extended minutes to do anything to warrant getting more minutes, right? Like, you need one to get to the other. And unless he's just making shots, like, Gabe isn't going to do enough defensively for Izzo not to immediately go back to Watts or Henry. And you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? Because if you're going to put up that shot because you want to show that you can make shots and you miss it, well, now you're out, right?
Yeah. So is Gabe your starting 2 next year?
I would think so.
So it'd be Watts, Brown, Henry, Hauser, Tillman.
Pretty good starting 5.
Or Malik Hall maybe in there at the 4. Like, I could see, could Henry play the 2 and you go Watts, Henry, Hauser, Hall, Tillman?
I think you need some shooting.
I mean, Henry, 34%. Hauser can shoot. The starting Watts and Brown is a thing, right? Like, there's going to be some frustration there with that group, whether it's decision making. Like, if Henry can slide down, you might have more trusted players in that rotation.
Yeah, and there's going to be. I think you're going to see both. I think you're going to see both lineups. That's true. And you're right on Aaron. Now that I think about it, there's no reason for him not to get time at the 2 next year.
Especially if he's going to be, he needs to grow. Like, I think that's his growth path in this offense, is to become more of a little bit of a secondary playmaker. And I guess the biggest hole that I see then is depth in the backcourt, right? Like, beyond, like, I mean, maybe Gabe Brown, but you don't, similar to what we talked about Michigan, you don't have a lot of guys under 6'4" who, like the Watts on this team, right? Like a guy who comes in and just can play defense, guard the best perimeter player. There's not someone other than Rocket to do that really on the roster. I guess Hoggart would be that guy, right? I don't know that much about his game, but he would fit as that third guard where he could maybe play a little at both spots, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds right. Sorry, I just got distracted. Who do you... So, for people listening that might be scratching their head with your thoughts on Watts at point guard, where are your... Explain your red flags.
I think he's best as I think he was in a great role down the stretch, right? Play perimeter defense, hunt shots. If you're starting point guard for Michigan State, a team that always leads the country in assist rate, and you're you're known better for your step back jump shot than your passing ability, that's where I start to worry a little bit. And it's going to be jarring to go from Cassius Winston. Like, I know Winston turned the ball over sometimes and this and that, but he was the best point guard in the country for like 2.5 years, basically. So it's going to be a drop off regardless.
Right.
I mean, you just in terms of what you're getting as far as distribution, just reliable decision making to Rocket Watts, who I don't know. I mean, high potential, but I wouldn't put decision making at the top of his scouting report right now. And that can change a lot in a year. I don't know. It'll be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. Because I read off that lineup and that starting lineup, and you got to have a little bit of like, oh goddamn, that's not too bad right there, you know. And
no, it's not a bad lineup.
But yeah,
I think it would look better. Just take a generic grad transfer point guard who's good enough to play at this level. If you could put him next to Watts and then Henry at the 3, Hauser,
sure,
bring Gabe Brown off the bench, that makes a lot more sense.
Sure,
that's kind of what I'm saying, right? It's not that.
Oh no, I agree.
I
mean, I think you should bring in a point guard just for, even if you do want Rocket to be the one, just so that it is not all or nothing, basically. Then it's, you know, if Rocket just can't do it, and if you're just kind of forcing that, you know, square peg round hole type deal all year long, Izzo's just losing his shit every game, you need some viable option going into the year beyond a freshman and Foster Loyer.
Yeah, Rocket Watts with Foster Loyer as a backup is a scary point guard situation. I think everyone would agree on that.
Yeah.
So so Michigan State has one scholarship open, you said?
Yeah, well, I mean, when Jalen Terry walked, that left them with one open. Unless I'm missing one, I don't think I am. I think this is up to date.
It'll be interesting how that's used then, for sure. And again, if the transfer rule changes and it's not just grad transfers who are immediately eligible, there should be all sorts of opportunities there. As much as Izzo claims to be against the rule, it could come into benefit there.
For sure.
But we've also, it's a tough evaluation, right? Like, think back to 2018 when Michigan took Jaron Simmons.
Mm-hmm.
Most people looked at that as that would be Michigan's starting point guard. And the step up in competition can be tough. So, up transfers are not always home runs, especially at point guard. So,
right.
It'll be interesting where that transfer, if that transfer comes from, and then how do you project them in the system, right? It's a lot to learn and grow that relationship.
Yeah, and that's kind of when I look at Aiken, I mean, he's really good, but most of his junior year, he was putting up monster numbers. Now he played some non-conference play this year and put up 34 on Maryland. So obviously that'll be the thing that everyone talks about.
I mean, he can play. He was a high major kid out of high school.
I know. But he played 4 years of Ivy League basketball. That's all. That's all I'm saying. And it's a different deal. It's a different deal. Just to do this, and we saw it. I mean, both of you and I think we're both convinced that Jaron Simmons was going to. He was the player of the year in that conference, and flat out just couldn't play at this level. So, I don't know. It is a really hard deal projecting up transfers. But if it's just a free for all and they can just get a guy who's already played high major ball, you got to take him.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely is where you would have to use the roster spot. And I think would you think about a late? I mean, it's so hard now to add a late guy, like a unsigned or late bloomer guy type. You just can't.
I don't think there's any reason to.
Yeah, I think that's
you already have a freshman point guard, right?
Yeah,
you have AJ Hogger. There's no reason to just bring in another freshman point guard. I don't think, at least.
Yeah, I think you have a better chance of getting. And this is a season that you're talking about contending, not building. You need the point guard to go with Xavier Tillman if he's coming back. That's what it comes down to. I mean, Aiken makes a lot of sense. He can shoot threes at volume, right? It's just the struggle is he's played 63 games in 4 years, right? He has not been healthy through a whole season, really, over the last couple seasons, and that makes it particularly tough to say, all right, this kid is 6 foot, 175. He's struggled to stay healthy, and now he's going to come play 35 games in the Big Ten. Mm-hmm. I mean, at Michigan State's tempo, that's a lot.
Yeah.
When he's getting hurt in the Ivy League where it's not that.
Right. But there will be a million more names that come available, I would think. At some point in time, I don't know, it might be September for all I know.
Yeah, that's the thing.
But at some point, I would think, but it was nice. It was nice just even having this conversation. I kind of forgot for a second that looking out the window, I haven't seen a car drive by.
It's nice to talk a little basketball.
It was, and we will do this more. Maybe try to come up with some kind of off the beaten path topics. We
got to dig deep.
Come up with something.
Problem with the podcast bullshitting about current happenings is if current happenings stop.
Correct. That's an issue. So, but yeah, I mean, we'll have stuff, maybe break down guys individually on the year that they had and stuff like that. We will find a way to pass the time because, frankly, we have no other option. So
we have to pass the time.
We have to do it together. So we appreciate all you guys listening, though. Hold on to those subscriptions to Hoops and The Athletic because there's not the content doesn't stop. There are no games, but sports don't stop. I have a lot of stuff coming. Actually made a list yesterday brainstorming and then wondered if I was going to have enough time to get to everything on it. So that's probably wishful thinking, but I got a lot of stuff to come. Dylan, I'm sure you were going to find all kinds of creative ways to keep people coming to the site, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. We're going to have all sorts of, whether it's recruiting stuff, whether it's we're already starting looking back on individual players. We're going to have off-season content. We've been through an off-season before. We'll get through it.
There you go.
Just don't know how long it'll take.
So everyone, be safe out there. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your loved ones.
Stay at home.
Stay at home. We are thinking of all of you. We really appreciate all of your support. And that'll do it. We will talk again. And until then, support your local businesses as best you can, as those bartenders and servers take a little time off here. But let's all get through this. Thanks.